In the quiet tapestry of Oak Haven, a suburban haven woven with the threads of everyday routines and comforting predictability, life hummed with an almost deceptive calm. For families like the Vances, this serenity was the bedrock, a promise whispered in the rustling leaves of ancient oak trees and the laughter echoing from neighborhood parks. Eleanor, their vibrant 19-year-old daughter, embodied this tranquil existence, a beacon of youthful promise and unbridled joy. She was a presence effervescent and unmistakable, charting a course toward a future as bright as her smile. Yet, in an instant, the canvas of this perfect piece was brutally torn. The familiar rhythm of footsteps ceased. A door remained inexplicably ajar. A life so vividly present simply evaporated into the thin autumn air, leaving behind only the chilling unanswered question: how could someone vanish so completely without a single trace from a world designed to keep them safe? The evening of October 12 began like any other in Oak Haven, a suburban mosaic of manicured lawns and quiet cul-de-sacs where the rhythm of life beat with predictable tranquility. Neighbors exchanged polite waves, children's laughter faded with the twilight, and the scent of autumn leaves drifted on a gentle breeze. This was the world Eleanor Ellie Vance knew, a world she was eager to step beyond, yet one she always returned to a cherished anchor. At 19, Ellie was a supernova of potential, her spirit as boundless as her ambition. She dreamed of a career in marine biology, her college applications already scattered across her desk, each one a testament to her meticulous planning and boundless hope. Ellie was just larger than life. Her mother, Sarah Vance, would later recount, her voice still laced with the raw edge of disbelief, months after the last echo of her daughter's laughter had faded from their home. She filled every room, every conversation, always sketching in her journal, planning her next adventure. We talked that night just like any other night. She was going to meet friends for coffee, then come straight home to finish an essay. Sarah's hands would often clench, a futile gesture against the crushing weight of what came next. Ellie left the house around 7 o'clock, a quick goodbye to her parents, her keys jingling, a familiar backpack slung over her shoulder. Surveillance footage from a nearby cafe captured her briefly sipping a latte with friends, her bright smile unmistakable. At 9:15, a text to her mother, simple and reassuring, heading home now. Be there in 15. But the minutes stretched, then hours. The porch light remained on a silent sentinel, waiting. The familiar sound of her car never materialized. The initial phone calls to friends turned into frantic dial tones and unanswered questions. Sarah's concern morphed into a cold dread that began to tighten its grip around her chest. Thomas Vance, Ellie's father, walked the neighborhood streets, his voice hoarse, calling her name into the deepening silence. By midnight, the Oak Haven Police Department received the call. Officers arrived, their faces etched with a practiced solemnity, their flashlights cutting through the suburban night as they scoured every park, every vacant lot, every shadowed lane that Ellie might have traversed. A K-9 unit was deployed, its mournful barks echoing through the empty woods that bordered the town, yet yielding no discernible track. The frantic urgency of the first few hours slowly gave way to a chilling, agonizing calm. Each sunrise brought no answers, only a fresh wave of despair. Roadblocks yielded nothing. Community posters emblazoned with Ellie's vibrant smile soon began to weather and fade under the relentless sun and sporadic rain. The initial desperate search fueled by hope and adrenaline, dissipated into a frustrating void. The Vances watched helpless as their daughter's disappearance transcended from a local crisis to a cold case file. The family wrestled with a void that defied understanding. Oak Haven, once a symbol of security, now held a terrifying secret in its silent streets. And in the Vance home, the absence of a single bright light cast an immeasurable shadow, settling a chilling, unbearable weight upon every passing day. As the initial storm of desperate searches subsided, the passage of weeks into months carved deeper lines of worry across Oak Haven. The flyers, once bright and hopeful sentinels, now clung to lampposts, their edges fraying colors muted by the relentless sun and seasonal rains. They became stark reminders of a vibrancy lost, mirroring the fading certainty that Eleanor Vance would simply walk back into their lives. The town, once a unified front of anxious neighbors, slowly receded into a private, guarded quiet, unsure how to bear the persistent ache of an unresolved disappearance. For Sarah, Vance's time had fractured. Her days became a meticulous, agonizing ritual, lingering by Ellie's untouched bedroom door, running her fingers over the familiar patterns of her daughter's favorite blanket, inhaling the faint, lingering scent of lavender from an uncapped lotion bottle on the dressers. Every morning, I still pour her coffee, Sarah confided, her voice a thin, brittle whisper, eyes fixed on a point beyond the visible. For a split second, I expect to hear her footsteps. Then the silence descends, absolute and crushing. She moved through her home like a wraith, her grief a palpable, suffocating presence that clung to every surface Ellie had known. Thomas Vance, her husband, responded differently, retreating into a profound internal landscape. His once robust laughter had been replaced by a quiet, haunted solemnity. He would sit for hours on the porch, swing a silent vigil, watching the empty driveway, the unspoken questions in his eyes, a testament to a father's agonizing powerlessness. The vibrant hum of their shared life had been replaced by an unsettling quiet punctuated only by the heavy weight of absence. It was into this desolate landscape that Detective Sergeant Ben Carter, lead investigator with the Oak Haven Police Department, stepped. Carter was a man forged in the crucible of countless cases, his demeanor as steady and unyielding as granite, yet his eyes, sharp and unwavering, ceaselessly sifted through facts. He had overseen every initial protocol, the neighborhood canvasses, the exhaustive forensic sweeps of the Vance home, the interviews that had circled back to nowhere. Each lead, each promising thread, had unspooled into a frustrating void. "We exhausted every avenue," Carter stated, his tone methodical, carefully devoid of superfluous emotion, though his jaw remained subtly clenched. Surveillance footage was meticulously reviewed. Cell phone data analyzed down to the last ping. Every social media interaction traced. And each time we found ourselves facing a blank wall. It's the most challenging aspect of these cases, when the facts simply cease to exist. You're left with this gnawing feeling deep down that the crucial piece remains hidden just beyond reach. He gestured to a file on his desk, its spine thick with reports, yet its contents offered little solace. That dossier represents the immense effort and the intractable silence. The initial frenzy had inevitably cooled, transitioning Ellie Vance's case from an active, urgent pursuit to the chilling realm of the unsolved. It was formally designated a cold case, a bureaucratic term that felt like a final, irreversible judgment to the Vance family even without the grim certainty of a body. The Oakhaven community continued its wary vigilance, a fragile hope flickering against the encroaching darkness. But the days turned into a relentless, silent march. Ellie's story, once a vibrant splash of color in their town's narrative, had now dissolved into a stark, bewildering enigma, leaving behind only the relentless cold silence. Months blurred into a desolate expanse for the Vance family, the absence of answers, a constant grinding ache. File on Ellie's disappearance, once the subject of intense, relentless scrutiny, had settled into the quiet, dusty corner reserved for cold cases. Hope, once a vibrant flame, had dwindled to a barely perceptible flicker, a fragile ember in the vast darkness. It was at this juncture when the Oakhaven Police Department had exhausted every conventional avenue that an unexpected and profoundly unsettling sound pierced the silence, a phone ringing in the dead of night at the precinct's anonymous tip line. Call was brief, raspy, and immediately disconnected. A terse, almost guttural whisper offered a single cryptic phrase: Whisperwood Creek. Look deeper. Coordinates provided were imprecise, pointing to a rarely visited, forgotten stretch of the waterway, a place known locally for its dense, almost impenetrable undergrowth and its propensity to swell violently with seasonal flash floods, then recede, leaving behind layers of tangled debris and hidden secrets. The dispatcher, accustomed to hoaxes and misguided calls, nearly dismissed the brevity of the message. But something in the caller's hurried urgency, a desperate edge beneath the disguise, prompted her to forward the message to Detective Sergeant Ben Carter. Carter stared at the transcribed notes, the anonymous tip sheet, a stark, almost absurd contrast to the thick, meticulously organized folders of Ellie Vance's cold case. His initial reaction was a practiced skepticism honed by years of chasing phantom leads. Anonymous tips were often dead ends, malicious pranks, or desperate pleas from those disconnected from reality. Yet the raw specificity of the location, the mention of Whisperwood Creek, a place notoriously difficult to access, a true wild margin of Oakhaven, caught his attention. He leaned back in his chair, his gaze drifting to the city map pinned to his office wall, his eyes tracing the winding blue line of the creek, a forgotten vein running through the suburban landscape. A cold case investigator often found himself operating on a quiet, persistent unease, a conviction that the truth lay just beyond the visible. This was one of those moments. It's a long shot, Carter conceded to his team, his voice calm, pragmatic, but with an underlying current of resolve that belied the words. But we have exhausted everything else. This isn't just a random name. It's a specific, isolated area. If there's even a shred of truth to it, if it points to anything we've overlooked, we owe it to the Vances. The strategic decision was made to deploy a small, highly specialized team. This wouldn't be a public, broad, sweeping search. This would be a targeted, discreet operation designed to investigate without alerting a potential perpetrator or stirring false hope in a community already scarred by loss. The chosen section of Whisperwood Creek lay miles from any paved road, a winding natural fissure carved through an ancient forest. It was a place where sunlight struggled to penetrate the dense canopy, where the air hung heavy with the scent of damp earth and decay, and where the ceaseless murmur of rushing water could mask other, more sinister noises. Locals knew it as a place of uneasy solitude, a natural repository for forgotten secrets, and the detritus of casual discard. The creek bed itself, choked with roots and shadowed by overhanging branches, felt like a silent witness to countless hidden histories. As the specialized police team packed their gear, their movements precise and deliberate, a palpable tension settled over them. They were not just entering a challenging physical environment. They were preparing to wade back into the stagnant cold waters of a case that had long refused to yield its grim truth. The whispered lead had offered a direction, but the path ahead was shrouded in an ominous uncertainty. The anonymous tip had drawn Detective Sergeant Ben Carter and his small specialized unit into the heart of Whisperwood Creek, a landscape starkly removed from Oakhaven's cultivated tranquility. Here, the creek snaked through an ancient growth of sycamores and twisted willows, their branches weaving a perpetual twilight even in the middle of a clear day. The air hung thick and heavy-laden with the damp scent of decaying leaves and the drone of unseen insects, a visceral contrast to the crisp, manicured air of the town they had left behind. This was a realm where the wild had asserted its dominion, and human presence felt like a fragile, temporary intrusion. Their mission was precise, yet physically grueling, an exhaustive grid search along the creek's banks, extending into the dense, thorny undergrowth and the shallow, opaque waters. Each officer moved with deliberate slowness, their eyes meticulously sweeping every inch of ground, gloved hands parting clinging vines and pushing aside matted layers of fallen detritus. The terrain was unforgiving. Treacherous, slippery inclines gave way to boggy stretches that threatened to pull their boots down, forcing them to navigate a labyrinth of gnarled roots and hidden sinkholes. When the sun did manage to pierce the dense canopy, it arrived in oppressive, suffocating patches, amplifying the physical demands. Sweat plastered uniforms to their backs within the first hour, but the methodical pace never faltered, a testament to grim resolve. Their initial visual sweeps yielded only the natural refuse of a wild waterway, decaying logs, reduced to pulp, rusted metal, and generations of fallen branches caught in the slow current. The earth beneath their boots remained stubbornly undisturbed, offering no telltale signs of recent excavation beyond the natural chaos of flood and erosion. The profound quiet of the remote location pressed in on them, broken only by the rustle of their movements and the ceaseless, indifferent murmur of the creek itself. It was a silence that felt heavy, almost sentient, a vast, ancient witness to countless unrecorded moments, holding its secrets close. Detective Carter moved among his team, his gaze sharp, missing nothing. He understood the brutal mathematics of such a search, countless hours of arduous, often futile labor, sustained by the fragile hope of a single, definitive break. He watched his officers, their faces grimed with dirt and exertion, as they systematically cleared their designated sectors. Every careful rake of fallen leaves, every patient overturning of a stone, every probing thrust of a long rod into the damp earth underscored the meticulous nature of their difficult craft. It was an unyielding, silent battle against the overwhelming vastness of nature and the relentless, erasing hand of time. Days stretched long and grueling, testament to their unwavering commitment. They sought any disruption in the Earth's natural composition, any anomaly that might betray a hidden truth. The land held its grim narratives fiercely, yet the detectives remained unyielding, determined to find a way to make the silent creek bed yield its echoes, to finally speak for Eleanor Vance. The oppressive calm of Whisperwood Creek continued to guard its dark secrets, but the search had only just begun to truly penetrate its depths. Days of relentless, grueling, searching along Whisperwood Creek had yielded nothing but weary bodies and the unyielding silence of the terrain. The sheer scale of the search area, compounded by the challenging, unforgiving landscape and its deceptive layers of natural debris, had pushed conventional methods to their absolute limits. Detective Sergeant Ben Carter stood on the bank, his boots caked with the clinging mud, surveying the dense, impenetrable undergrowth. His jaw was set, a quiet frustration etched into his features. They had delved as deep as human hands and eyes could, but the creek was a master of profound concealment. Something more was desperately needed, a sophisticated means to uncover what the earth fiercely held captive. It was a pivotal moment in the stalled investigation, demanding a decision that transcended traditional police work, a leap into advanced forensics. Carter reached out to a specialist, a scientist capable of interpreting the Earth's hidden language. Dr. Lena Petrova arrived at Whisperwood Creek, a figure of striking precision and calm competence. A seasoned forensic anthropologist, her expertise seamlessly extended to the cutting edge of non-invasive investigative techniques, particularly ground-penetrating radar or GPR. Her presence brought a new scientific gravitas to the arduous, muddy search. We often encounter situations where conventional excavation is either physically impossible or too destructive to the scene. Dr. Petrova explained, her voice clear and precise, her gaze methodical as she surveyed the challenging landscape. GPR offers a non-invasive solution. It's essentially an unseen eye beneath the surface, allowing us to map what lies below without disturbing the soil. The narrator would then elaborate, detailing the intricate science GPR functions by transmitting high-frequency electromagnetic pulses into the ground. These pulses interact with various subsurface materials, soil, rock, buried objects, or critically disturbed earth, and reflect back to a receiver. Different materials and densities create unique signatures in these reflected signals, appearing as distinct anomalies on the unit's digital display. This technology could pinpoint not just objects, but also subtle changes in soil stratification that might betray a clandestine burial even years after the fact. The team watched as Dr. Petrova and her assistants meticulously assembled the GPR unit. It was a deceptively simple piece of equipment, a wheeled cart housing the antenna, and a small digital display, all connected by cables to a robust power unit. The low, steady hum of the machine became the new pulse of the search, a stark technological counterpoint to the quiet anticipation that now pervaded the creek bed. Carefully, systematically, Dr. Petrova began to push the GPR unit along the designated grid lines, its wheels cutting shallow furrows through the damp earth. Her eyes remained fixed on the screen, a swirling kaleidoscope of lines and patterns, a dynamic map of the unseen world below. The atmosphere on the creek bank shifted profoundly. The previous days had been defined by the sheer physical exertion of digging, sifting, and sweeping. Now the work transformed into a silent, focused vigil as the team placed their unwavering faith in technology's ability to reveal what human eyes simply could not perceive. Every flicker on the screen, every subtle shift in the waveforms represented a potential breakthrough, a hidden signature in the earth that might finally speak for Eleanor Vance. The suspense was almost unbearable as the continuous hum of the GPR promised either a profound, shattering revelation or the ultimate enduring silence. The GPR unit hummed its steady mechanical cadence across the creek bed, Dr. Lena Petrova's eyes never wavering from the diagnostic screen. Then the uniform patterns that had depicted the undisturbed earth abruptly fractured. Jagged, irregular lines materialized, disrupting the smooth flow, signaling distinct anomalies beneath the surface. Petrova paused, marking several precise points with a focused intensity, her finger tracing the digital evidence of displaced soil, of something that starkly defied the ancient natural stratification of the creek bed. Here, she stated, her voice quiet but resonant with professional certainty. And here, these are significant disturbances, consistent with excavation, consistent with a clandestine burial site. A palpable tension descended upon the assembled team, replacing the rhythmic thrum of the GPR with a heavy collective silence. Detective Sergeant Ben Carter stood nearby, his gaze locked onto the marked locations. This was it. The distant whisper, the audacious long shot, the cold, exacting science had converged on this singular, ominous point. The time for scanning had ceased. The moment for unearthing had irrevocably arrived. Forensic technicians, their faces etched with grim determination, moved in with specialized tools. Gone were the broad shovels of initial sweeps. Now, miniature trowels and fine brushes became their instruments. The work was painstaking, almost archaeological in its precision. Each scoop of dark earth was removed with agonizing care, meticulously sifted for any fragment, any clue. Layers of rich, dark topsoil gave way to compacted clay, then to a dense mix of river rock and fine sediment. The only sounds were the soft scrape of metal on dirt, the rustle of disturbed foliage, and the distant murmur of the creek, now a low, funereal accompaniment. Every eye was fixed on the slowly deepening pit, a growing void in the earth that promised a terrible answer. The first unmistakable sign emerged, not as a definitive object, but as a subtle shift in the soil itself. A patch of earth significantly darker and more compressed than the surrounding ground distinctly hinted at a previous disturbance. Then the glint of something stark white, half buried in the tenacious mud, caught a forensic technician's trained eye. A profound hush fell over the team. Hands worked with even greater reverence, brushing away the clinging earth, as if uncovering something infinitely fragile, infinitely sacred. Slowly, agonizingly, a dark, unsettling outline began to emerge from the concealing embrace of the soil. The moment of full discovery offered a stark, brutal clarity. Partial human remains inextricably entwined with the roots and mud of the creek bed, finally yielded to the dim, filtered light. It was a sight that spoke volumes of violence, of desperate concealment, and of a life brutally silenced. The forensic team, though internally impacted, moved with disciplined precision, securing the scene, documenting every minute detail, every fragment. Each movement was deliberate, respectful, treating the remains with the dignity owed to a life that had been denied its natural conclusion. Detective Carter stood over the scene, his stoic demeanor a carefully constructed fortress. His jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly, his eyes shadowed with the immense gravity of the discovery. For months, the Vance family had clung to the sliver of hope that Ellie might still be alive, perhaps held captive somewhere, or simply lost. In this devastating moment, that fragile hope was definitively, irrevocably crushed. What had begun as a desperate search for a missing girl had now undeniably transformed into a grim homicide investigation. Creek, once a silent keeper of secrets, had finally yielded its truth, and it was a truth as stark and unyielding as granite. The unearthing was complete, but the deepest, most agonizing questions were only just beginning to surface. From the muddy root-choked banks of Whisperwood Creek, the carefully excavated remains treated with the utmost reverence were transported under heavy guard to the sterile climate-controlled environment of the State Forensic Laboratory. Here, within the unforgiving white light of scientific scrutiny, the grim narratives, once hidden by earth and time, would finally begin to unfold. Dr. Lena Petrova, her work at the site, concluded, now resumed her primary role as forensic anthropologist, ready to become the voice for what the silent bones would reveal. Within the pristine lab, each fragile bone, each minute fragment was laid out with meticulous precision on a sanitized table, a macabre jigsaw puzzle awaiting assembly. Dr. Petrova, clad in sterile scrubs, moved with a focused intensity, her movements deliberate, her specialized tools delicate. Her mantra, often repeated in the quiet of the lab, was simple: every bone contains a silent history. When a life is taken violently, the earth conceals, yes, but it also preserves a record. She meticulously cleaned the skeletal evidence, carefully noting every contour, every subtle fracture, every minute anomaly. It was a painstaking process of reconstruction, working to piece together the grim tableau of Eleanor Vance's final moments. The initial steps in identifying skeletal remains are fundamental, relying on a universally applied scientific protocol. Dr. Petrova first constructed a biological profile, carefully determining age, sex, ancestry, and estimated stature from various skeletal indicators. This preliminary assessment yielded a consistent match with Eleanor Vance's known characteristics. The definitive confirmation, however, often resides in the most minute, irrefutable details. Dental records precisely obtained from Ellie's family dentist provided the conclusive link. The unique pattern of specific fillings, the precise alignment of a particular molar, the entire unique dental history, all aligned perfectly. Forensic odontology had unequivocally established the identity. The remains belonged, beyond any doubt, to Eleanor Vance. With identity confirmed, the investigation's focus intensified, pivoting sharply to the cause and manner of death. Dr. Petrova's exhaustive examination of the skull and long bones revealed distinct, patterned trauma. The formal report from the medical examiner, drawing directly from her meticulous findings, was chillingly precise. Ellie Vance had suffered severe blunt force trauma to the head, consistent with multiple forceful blows. The nature of these injuries, inconsistent with an accidental fall or any natural event, undeniably pointed to a brutal homicide. Such severe skeletal trauma, especially when inflicted with significant force, leaves unmistakable imprints. These marks are not random, but a stark, undeniable record of violence etched in bone, revealing the very nature of the attack. This scientific precision, while absolutely crucial for the legal investigation, brought a crushing, irreversible finality to the Vance family. Detective Sergeant Ben Carter, his voice somber and heavy with the weight of the news, personally delivered the devastating confirmation to Sarah and Thomas Vance. "Ellie, it's Ellie," he stated the words, a hammer blow even to his hardened professionalism. Sarah Vance's face crumpled inward, the last vestiges of her fragile, desperate hope dissolving into air. Thomas, usually a picture of stoic resilience, visibly sagged his hand, reaching blindly, instinctively for his wife's trembling one. You never want to hear it," Sarah later wept, her voice raw, fractured by the confirmation of her deepest fears. "Even when you know deep down, you pray it isn't true." That call it wasn't just about identification. It was the moment her missing life became a brutal, undeniable fact. The meticulous science of the laboratory had provided answers, But those answers carried an immeasurable heart-wrenching consequence, transforming a painful uncertainty into an enduring absolute sorrow. The search for a girl was over. The hunt for a killer had just begun. With Eleanor Vance's identity undeniably confirmed, and the brutal cause of her death established as a homicide, the investigation within the Oakhaven Police Department pivoted with a renewed grim urgency. The anguished search for a missing girl had concluded. A relentless hunt for a killer had begun in earnest. Detective Sergeant Ben Carter, now carrying the heavier burden of definitive truth, felt the distinct shift in momentum. The Ellie Vance file had transformed from a chilling mystery into a murder case demanding a meticulous reevaluation of every piece of data, every previously dismissed lead, every shadow of a suspicion. The strategic redirection of the inquiry began with a deep, exhaustive dive back into the initial weeks of Ellie's disappearance. Detectives pulled every old missing person report, scrutinizing not just Ellie's, but also any local incidents of domestic disturbance or unexplained activity that had occurred around the time of her vanishing. They painstakingly cross-referenced existing witness statements against the newly established forensic timeline, the estimated window of Ellie's death, precisely derived from Dr. Petrova's analysis. Conversations once deemed peripheral were now subjected to intense scrutiny for subtle inconsistencies, for names that might have seemed irrelevant then, but now resonated with unsettling significance. The police department's digital archives hummed with activity, re-analyzing phone records, combing through surveillance footage, and dissecting social media posts, each search aiming to uncover any hidden connection, any overlooked shadow in the initial chaos. It was during this exhaustive reassessment that a name began to surface with uncomfortable frequency: Marcus Thorne. Thorne was a man on the fringes of Oakhaven society, known for a volatile temper that simmered just beneath a deceptively quiet exterior. He had been questioned briefly during the initial missing persons search, a perfunctory inquiry into his whereabouts on the night Ellie vanished, given his vague acquaintance with her through a mutual friend. His alibi then had been a casual wave of the hand, almost dismissive. "I was just out walking," nowhere specific. At the time, with no body, no confirmed crime, his statement had been logged and filed away. Now, armed with the grim certainty of Ellie's fate, Thorne's name returned to Carter's desk with a disturbing persistence, a discordant note in the quiet symphony of Oakhaven. Local patrol officers had previously noted him frequenting the very isolated stretch of Whisperwood Creek, where Ellie's remains were found not for the recreational purposes of fishing or hiking, but for long solitary walks that seemed to lead nowhere purposeful. Community whispers, once dismissed as mere gossip, now took on a chilling weight. Stories of Thorne's sudden irrational outbursts, his unpredictable mood swings, his unsettling possessive behavior towards women he barely knew. He had been a figure shrouded in a perplexing ambiguity, a man who seemed content to exist in the periphery, yet now the inexorable currents of evidence were pulling him irrevocably into the center of the storm. Detective Carter reviewed Thorne's initial statement, comparing it against the stark, newly revealed evidence. Thorne's casual mention of being by the creek that night, just clearing my head, a throwaway line, then, now, echoed as a chilling admission. His alibi for the night of Ellie's disappearance, once accepted as unremarkable, began to show critical fissures under this renewed, laser-focused scrutiny, a fragile construct starting to crack. Each seemingly innocent detail from his past interactions, each vague recollection, now twisted into something far more sinister, starkly illuminated by the grim discovery in the creek bed. The silent, painstaking investigation had found its new terrifying focus, and Marcus Thorne stood undeniably at its epicenter. The sterile, windowless interrogation room at the Oak Haven Police Department hummed with a low, barely perceptible electronic thrum, a stark counterpoint to the psychological battle about to unfold. Detective Sergeant Ben Carter, accompanied by his partner Detective Reynolds, sat across a polished table from Marcus Thorne. Thorne, dressed in a faded denim jacket, projected an initial calm, his hands resting loosely on the table, his eyes making direct, unwavering contact. He appeared cooperative, almost bored, as if this was an inconvenience, not an inquiry into murder. "Mr. Thorne, thank you for coming in again," Carter began, his voice even adopting a non-threatening, almost conversational tone. "We're just tying up some loose ends on the Eleanor Vance case. I know we spoke briefly a while back when she first went missing." Thorne nodded, a slight, almost imperceptible shrug of his shoulders. "Sure, Detective. Anything to help. But I told you then I barely knew the girl. Didn't even remember her name half the time, honestly." His words were casual, dismissive, an initial wall constructed of feigned ignorance and indifference. This was the predator's calculated denial, an effort to appear utterly detached and unremarkable. Carter leaned forward slightly, his gaze unwavering, a subtle hardening in his eyes. "Right. But things have changed, Mr. Thorne. We now know what happened to Ellie, and we have some new information that connects you directly to the area where she was found." The shift in Carter's tone was subtle, yet distinct, moving from rapport building to a direct, probing challenge. He then introduced the first piece of circumstantial evidence, delivered with quiet authority: Thorne's cell phone data, placing his device squarely within a 1-mile radius of Whisperwood Creek at the precise time of Ellie's disappearance. Thorne's composure began to fray at the edges. A flicker of annoyance crossed his face, a momentary tightening around his eyes. His hands, previously relaxed, now curled slightly, his knuckles whitening as they pressed against the tabletop. "My phone. I'm out there all the time. Hiking, clearing my head. I told you that. Doesn't mean anything." His voice remained steady, but a subtle, almost imperceptible tremor was now discernible beneath the carefully maintained calm. He shifted in his seat, his eyes darting to the one-way mirror, then back to Carter, a nascent unease beginning to surface. Carter pressed on systematically, introducing pieces of the puzzle, each one a nail in the coffin of Thorne's casual denial. "Witnesses recall seeing your truck, a distinctive, older model, parked near the old logging trail leading to the isolated part of the creek. Multiple times. In fact, a few days after Ellie disappeared, a local hiker reported a strong, unusual odor near the very spot where our ground-penetrating radar indicated significant subsurface disturbance. Each piece of information was delivered factually, without overt accusation, allowing the sheer weight of the accumulating evidence to speak for itself." Thorne's controlled demeanor visibly fractured. His answers became increasingly evasive, laced with thinly veiled defensiveness and a growing edge of desperation. "Smell. It's a creek. It smells like mud, like dead leaves. What are you even talking about? I wasn't doing anything out there. I've got nothing to do with this." His voice rose, sharply punctuated by agitated denials that verged on shouting. He began to rub his hands together, a rapid, nervous habit, then suddenly slammed them flat on the table, a defiant, if desperate, assertion of innocence. "You've got nothing on me. I haven't done anything. You're trying to pin this on me because I'm some quiet guy who likes to walk alone." He attempted to deflect, to portray himself as a convenient scapegoat for a larger, unknown crime. The interrogation transformed into a silent battle of wills, a tightrope walk between Detective Carter's relentless methodical pressure and Thorne's increasingly desperate, agitated unraveling. Thorne's narrative began to buckle, his carefully constructed alibi fracturing under the relentless weight of new revelations. He'd forgotten crucial details, misremembered key timelines. Placid mask had utterly fallen, revealing the true face of the cornered predator, defensive, unpredictable, and fiercely determined to escape the inevitable truth that was now closing in around him, suffocating the air in the room with unspoken, harrowing knowledge. The air in the interrogation room grew heavy, thick, with the unspoken weight of suspicion and the cloying scent of desperation. Detective Sergeant Ben Carter watched Marcus Thorne, his own expression, a mask of unwavering resolve. Thorne, increasingly agitated, had begun to sweat, his denials coming faster, more desperate, as if words alone could construct an impenetrable shield. "You're twisting things," he spat, his voice hoarse, his gaze flickering wildly. "I told you I was just out there, minding my business." "Your business, Mr. Thorne Carter," countered his voice, steady, devoid of inflection, "doesn't usually involve being at a specific remote location at the exact time a young woman disappears. Your phone records, for example, show a consistent pattern of movement away from your home that night directly towards Whisperwood Creek. A tower ping places your device within 50 yards of the old logging trail at precisely 9:45 p.m. Thorne flinched, a visible tremor passing through his frame. He stammered, his earlier defiance crumbling into a ragged defensiveness. That could be anyone. Those towers are huge. His eyes darted nervously. "They are Detective Reynolds," interjected her voice, sharp, cutting through his protest like a scalpel. "But the forensic analysis of the mud on your boots taken from your truck is undeniably unique, Mr. Thorne. It matches the distinct soil composition found only along a very specific isolated bend in the creek, precisely where we found Eleanor Vance. The ground-penetrating radar confirmed disturbed earth, and the soil from your vehicle matches that disturbed site." The words hung in the oppressive air, undeniable, each one a hammer blow. This was the unforced error, the inescapable scientific truth that utterly contradicted his every strained denial. Marcus Thorne's carefully constructed facade, meticulously maintained for months, began its slow, agonizing crack. His eyes darted desperately between the two detectives, then dropped to the polished table, his shoulders slumping. The nervous rubbing of his hands ceased abruptly, replaced by fingers clenching into tight fists, his nails digging painfully into his palms. A low moan escaped his throat, a guttural sound of utter, profound defeat. The suffocating silence that followed was broken only by Thorne's ragged, uneven breathing. Then the words began to spill out, disjointed, fragmented, raw with the shame and terror of exposure. It was not a coherent narrative, but a chilling mosaic of confession. He spoke of seeing Ellie walking home, a sudden dark impulse, taking root, festering. He had called out to her, feigning the shared acquaintance, luring her to the secluded creek path with a fabricated story of a lost pet. His voice dropped to a barely audible whisper as he recounted the brief struggle, the moments of frenzied violence, the crushing blows that silenced her vibrant life. Then the desperate, primitive act of concealment, digging, burying her beneath the very soil they had just described, convinced that the earth would keep his monstrous secret forever. The depths of his deception The cold calculation behind his actions were horrifying in their stark reality. He had left her there alone, entombed, allowing her family to suffer months of agonizing uncertainty, all while he walked free, shielded by his own chilling indifference. But the meticulous science, the GPR readings, and the damning soil samples had forced the ground's unwilling testimony. This was a truth as cold and hard as granite, confirmed by the very earth itself, yet one that defied all human understanding of such depravity. The weight of it hung heavy in the room, suffocating. The unburdening of truth was complete, but the full horror of Eleanor Vance's final moments and the chilling inner landscape of her killer had only just begun to surface. The hallowed halls of the Oakhaven County Courthouse pulsed with a grim collective anticipation. Every seat in the public gallery was filled a silent testament to the community's shared sorrow and their desperate hope for justice. Sarah and Thomas Vance sat rigidly in the front row, their faces etched with the profound weariness of months of grief, their eyes fixed on the man at the defense table, Marcus Thorne. He sat impassively, a chilling blankness in his gaze, seemingly unaffected by the somber proceedings unfolding around him. This hallowed space was where the painstaking work of the investigation would finally confront the cold, impartial calculus of the legal system. The prosecution methodically constructed its case, each piece of evidence a brick in the formidable wall closing in on Thorne. Central to their argument was the pioneering science that had literally unearthed Ellie Vance's truth from the earth itself. Dr. Lena Petrova took the stand, her demeanor as precise and unwavering as her scientific findings. With calm authority, she elucidated the principles of ground-penetrating radar for the jury, illustrating with compelling digital slides and clear diagrams how the GPR waves had painted an invisible telling map of disturbances beneath the creek bed. As you can discern here, Dr. Petrova stated her pointer, indicating a stark color-coded image projected onto a large screen, these irregular patterns distinctly deviating from natural geological formations, indicate significant subsurface disturbance and the presence of a foreign object consistent with a human burial. This technology allowed our team to pinpoint the precise location, guiding the excavation that followed with unerring accuracy. Her testimony was a masterclass in translating complex scientific data into undeniable visible evidence. Next, Detective Sergeant Ben Carter took the stand, his presence filling the courtroom with an undeniable gravity. His testimony formed a meticulous chronological chronicle of the entire investigation, from the initial desperate missing person search to the grim discovery of Ellie's remains, and the subsequent unraveling of Marcus Thorne's carefully constructed deceptions. With unwavering conviction, Carter recounted the strategic decision to pursue the anonymous tip, the arduous days-long search in the treacherous creek terrain, and the pivotal moment Dr. Petrova's GPR had offered its first chilling insights. He then detailed the mounting circumstantial evidence that had led them to Thorne, culminating in the interrogation room, where the perpetrator's defiant denials had finally fractured under the weight of truth. His voice, though calm and procedural, resonated with the chilling clarity of Thorne's fragmented confession, painting a stark, horrifying picture of Ellie's final moments and the calculated act of concealment. But the most profound and emotionally charged moment came with Sarah Vance's victim impact statement. Her voice, though trembling at first, gained a formidable strength as she addressed the court, her gaze unwavering, fixed squarely on Marcus Thorne. Eleanor was 19, She began, her words cutting through the courtroom's hushed silence like a blade. 19 years of brilliance, of boundless kindness, of a future she dreamed of every single day. You didn't just take her life, Mr. Thorne. You stole her dreams, her laughter, her chance to grow old, to love, to make the world better than she found it. Her eyes welled with tears that silently tracked paths down her cheeks, but her voice held firm, imbued with the raw power of a mother's pain. You left her buried in the cold mud like she was nothing. But she was everything. And you, Marcus Thorne, must never be allowed to walk the earth as a free person. Her plea was a visceral demand for accountability, echoing the collective heartbreak of a community scarred by loss. The jury, their faces etched with the solemn gravity of their immense task, retreated to deliberate. The hours that followed were a torturous, agonizing vigil for the Vance family and the Oak Haven community. Every minute stretched, every muffled sound from the jury room amplified by the profound silence of expectation. Finally, a note was passed to the judge. The courtroom doors swung open, the jury filed back in their expressions unreadable, their silent return drawing every breath from the room. Marcus Thorne stood, his face a mask of feigned composure, though a muscle twitched almost imperceptibly in his jaw. The judge's voice was clear, cutting through the heavy waiting air. Madam Foreperson, has the jury reached a verdict? Yes, Your Honor, we have. The silence in the room was absolute, suffocating. Every ear strained. The clerk took the folded paper from the foreperson's hand. In the matter of the state versus Marcus Thorne on the charge of murder in the first degree, how do you find? A single resounding word, clear and definitive, rang through the courtroom. A truth finally cast in stone, a heavy, irreversible judgment, guilty. With Marcus Thorne's conviction and life sentence, a grim chapter closed the courtroom's verdict, a definitive, unyielding pronouncement. For Sarah and Thomas Vance, justice offered not a restoration of what was lost, but a solemn acknowledgement, a hard-won step on their agonizing path forward. Sarah spoke of keeping Ellie's vibrant spirit alive, a strength drawn from the enduring support of their community, a defiant commitment against the encroaching despair. Detective Sergeant Ben Carter, though professionally satisfied by the outcome, carried the familiar, unhealing weight such cases invariably leave behind, knowing some losses leave permanent, indelible marks. Eleanor Vance's tragically brief life became a testament to truth unearthed her memory, a guiding light that pierced the darkness, forging a legacy through relentless pursuit of justice. In the face of profound loss, truth ultimately breaks through silence, ensuring justice is cast in stone. If you're compelled by stories where hidden truths emerge from the earth and justice finds its voice, join us for more deep dives into the Shadow Files. Don't forget to subscribe to Shadow Files and hit the notification bell.